Lovely stuff. I think I will get going and just let people trickle in as and when they come. So thank you everybody for taking time out of your busy days to come and join the session. Hopefully a really nice session for you. What myself and the team wanted to do was put together a session that basically addressed a lot of the questions that we encounter kind of day to day, and equally ask people that want to participate for questions around this subject, because we understand and appreciate that the area of marketing that we tackle is very niche and often laden with kind of hurdles, challenges, fears, anxiety, things like that. So just by way of introduction to the people that are in front of you, I'm Martin. I'm Client Service Director here at Gotsby, and joining me as moderator today for all your questions is Aisha, who looks after all of our marketing and comms. So by way of introduction then to the agency, I know there's kind of lots of people that are watching today that probably know who we are. So I'm going to do this as a quick, brief introduction if we haven't yet met. So we are Got to Be Ethnic. We're an award-winning multicultural marketing agency. Essentially what we do is we help brands connect with the 14.6 million people in the UK that come from an ethnic minority background. We understand ethnicity as a key audience demographic, just as any other marketeer would consider things like age, gender, socioeconomic background. We believe that ethnicity is a massive driver of the way that people behave, choose brands, and discover brands. And we'll go into a bit of that with the questions that we've received from people watching today a little bit deeper. And we can help kind of highlight what some of those differences might be. What we always say is it's very audience specific, and you'll kind of get to learn that through the session as well, that it is very audience first and looking specifically about their ethnic, cultural, and religious backgrounds that make that person an individual and group of people different, and therefore what we have to do around marketing and comms to reach those people more effectively, but also put the message in front of them that is more effective as well. So I guess the premise for and the background for this session a bit is an event that we were at recently. So Aisha, if you could hop on over to the next slide, this kind of helps give context to the session a bit more. So some of you may know, some of you may have seen us there and here at this webinar because you saw us there. We recently attended MadFest, which is a marketing industry event. If you haven't been and want to go next year, that's the first cue to get in touch with us because we can also look at tickets for next year as well. Basically, it's a culmination of really insightful talks and a lot of industry-based fun. What we wanted to use the event as is to talk to professionals in the industry about what their challenges were. So we used the method on the next slide to ask key questions to delegates about how they were feeling. And I think some of these bring context to the rest of the webinar, and I think it's a really nice place to start with that. So our first question to audiences was, are you concerned about making mistakes when marketing to diverse cultural groups? And what we found is so many people here answered yes. And I think that encapsulates what we see when we speak to a lot of brands, is there's a lot of anxiety for teams and individuals when kind of communicating to diverse cultural groups, kind of what are the impacts if we get it wrong, what are the negative perceptions for us looking like we are being performative and things like that. So I think that's why we thought this webinar would be really important, and some of those questions we can answer later on into the piece as well. And then equally, the next thing that we wanted to know from people, if they had a dedicated budget for multicultural marketing. And as you can see, this was kind of our most split question. And it was one of the really important things that we wanted to highlight as well, is that actually there's probably about 50-50 split of who has a budget for multicultural marketing. And when we spoke to people, we saw some of these kind of key trends that should pop up on screen in a second. So a lot of people, if they did have a budget, it was quite small and it was a small percentage of the budget. But what we see that as is a positive step forward. So what we always advocate for our clients is to look at your overall budget and work what we call inclusive media planning. So of that large media budget that I may have or small media budget that I may have, what percentage of that can I give to specifically trying to reach new audiences, develop my current audience, or solve a problem within a specific diverse audience that may need solving. And one of the questions later that we've received from someone goes to that point as well. A lot of people that said no said that they needed to as well. So obviously something that people are starting to think about. Equally why we wanted to kind of dispel some of these questions and equally ask people what their key problems were in this area. And then finally, the other kind of key question that we kind of asked people was if they thought it was important to collaborate with diverse suppliers and vendors. And I think really this links back to the first thing that we saw, is that loads of people are keen to work with and collaborate with diverse suppliers and vendors because of their kind of own anxiety, and that leaning into a professional and credible resource can really help kind of dispel some of those, I guess, areas of anxiety, areas of worry of getting it wrong. And I guess one of the key things is providing that lived experience. So that's one of the things that we really advocate for here at Gotta. So if you've ever spoken to me before, you'll know about kind of how we approach this is through insight and lived experience. So where are there people in the community that we can listen to and tap into for that lived experience? Because people that will know me and spoken to me before is data can get you so far, so we can live off insight and things like that. But really the power in authentically and kind of responsibly engaging with minority audiences is literally by listening. And it sounds really simple, and it is really simple. It is by doing that and leaning into that lived experience. So I guess that's kind of tee up in a session setting almost. And hopefully a lot of the things that we covered there as well, people in this call are feeling equally, and hopefully this session will help to resolve some of those. So this is probably my first point of which to say that this is an interactive session. If anybody has questions throughout the session, then please pop them in the chat. We have collected them before the session as well. So we just want to address some of those that kind of came up most often before the session, but equally we thought was most relevant to everybody, whether they asked a question or not before the session. So if you do have a question, please pop it in the chat. Aisha is on the call to moderate all questions and just make sure that everybody gets the answers they came for today. So if we dive into the first question, we were asked, how do cultural differences impact consumer behavior and decision making? So I wanted to split this up into a couple of parts. First, by setting the scene with a bit of really basic learning theory, I guess, is that people learn based on their environment. So from their family, from their community, and often if people have come from different backgrounds, they're likely to be learning different ideals to what other people in their environment and in their community might be feeling. And this is only kind of more exacerbated if you have moved from a different culture to this country. And I think that's the really key bit that we like to think about, and why we think it's so important to imagine ethnicity, culture, and religion as a key driver to kind of discovery and choice for brands. It's also important in this, I think, to think about how that impacts generationally. So you've got first, second, third generations, and how those ties to culture, religion, faith differ throughout those generations. The best kind of example of this that you can generally see in kind of UK society is that whenever there's a kind of steady stream of people moving to this country, there generally tends to be a closer tie to those cultural religious beliefs of the home nation. But then as you kind of tear down from that, people become what you would call more westernized, and therefore kind of more assimilated, more closely aligning with what we would consider as a base kind of behavior, which is kind of what you see from a general population. So just to take this question of how cultural differences then impact consumer behavior and decision making, we wanted to highlight kind of some of the key things that those cultural differences will impact, and that is important to consider when you're targeting, marketing, communicating with people from minority backgrounds. So one of the key things to look at is how a person interacts, discovers, and perceives brands. So this is very different if you look between different audiences. One of the key kind of insights that we've got at the bottom there is that Black and Afro-Caribbean people in the UK are 103% more likely than other minority audiences to discover a brand through a music streaming platform. So kind of instantly there, from a marketing and a targeting perspective, we can see that enables us to kind of use that bit of insight to target that audience. And then if you want to go the level deeper, you can then look at kind of genres of music that audience might over-index for, and similar things. All of the insight that we use throughout this piece is driven by GWI, which is a quarterly survey of 100,000 people in the UK. How we use that data is we look at someone's ethnicity, or a group of people's ethnicity, and compare that to a base level. So what is everybody saying versus what is a particular audience saying. And then equally, one of the key things to consider how cultural differences impact consumer behavior is what people are looking for in brands. So those that know the agency in a bit more depth will know that we look after one of the largest money transfer brands in the world. And some of the key things that different audiences look for from that brand are completely different. So when we look at South Asian audiences, they are looking for kind of security and kind of ultimately are being cost-led in that. And then other audiences might perceive something differently. So this is going back a bit now because post-Brexit, you see less kind of Eastern European migration into the UK. But based on that audience, they used to value security a lot more than other audiences. So it's specifically looking at what that audience is looking for in your brand. And then equally, finally, is how loyal is that audience to brands. So loyalty can generally change even based on ethnicity. And I think one of the key points that we're going to come on to, which I can kind of expand on, is also community across minority audiences. So the value and use that brands can make of community. But as I mentioned, I can come on to that a bit later. For people, just as a kind of highlight, I guess, is these slides will be available after this session. And there is a link at the bottom of this slide to our ethnic media white paper. So it covers kind of insight into all ethnic media available in the UK based on kind of demographics and things like that. It's one of our biggest downloaded white papers from smorgasbord of different brands who have found it really valuable to understand a bit more in depth the media that is available to them to reach particular audiences. So I would definitely go and check that out after this session as well. If we go to the next slide, I think we are on to the second question to touch on.
Yep, we have actually just had our first question in the chat to break it up. So this one's from Tariq. He said, one challenge I have is marketing to older, diverse, multicultural groups who do not widely use the channels, e.g. social media, and rely on younger family members for information, brackets often wrong, or even on information from the home country, examples, Slovak and Polish audiences in the UK following anecdotal information on vaccinations from home.
Yeah, cool. And I think it's a lovely question, Tariq, and I think we might have spoken in the past, but I guess to kind of broadcast this to everyone as well, I'll touch on different sections of the question in different ways. I'll go firstly to the marketing to old, diverse, multicultural groups who don't widely use channels as general audiences might, such as social media. So 100% understand the point. I think this goes back to one of the points that I made earlier in terms of looking at generationally where the target audience that you're trying to reach sits. So particularly when you look at older multicultural groups, is you're likely going to be looking at people that are first or second generation, most likely first, depending on which kind of group you're targeting, it will vary. But obviously, if you're talking to kind of first generation, as I mentioned before, their kind of cultural values, backgrounds, norms are going to be completely different. So it's addressing what those differences are and reaching them in a way that they're engaging with media. We know for first generation audiences, as Tariq's mentioned, that things like TV, things like radio are really effective ways of reaching that audience because they're still kind of over-indexing for those channels, whereas obviously we've seen younger generations move to your social medias, being more on TikTok. I know Aisha's TikTok time per day is probably about 1.5 hours at the moment. But yeah, she's a lot younger than I. And then one thing that we also look at that I think is really important to highlight in this group, and I can also kind of accompany that with an example that Tariq, I think, is probably very relevant to you, but is probably also relevant to other people in the room. So obviously, when you talk about minority audiences, typically, especially when you're talking about older minority audiences, they can be digitally excluded, as Tariq's kind of touched on. So one of the really important ways that we look at targeting those audiences is through what we call store merchandising. So depending on what area of the country you live in, you'll be very familiar with walking down a high street and seeing a what we would refer to as ethnic store. So a store that serves a particular community, whether that's Afro-Caribbean food, I live in Southampton. If you go to a particular area in Southampton, there are a lot of Polish and Eastern European shops that serve that community specifically. And what we do is we work with those stores to help share information, insight, leaflets, posters, things like this. And I think the reason why this is a really kind of effective tool to use for reaching older and equally digitally excluded audiences is because you're essentially borrowing the trust of that store. It's a store that people go to buy food from home, buy food that they're familiar with from home. It's a comfort for them. They generally have a good relationship with the store owner, and therefore you can kind of borrow that trust and help share that message. And I promised Tariq that I would share with him an example that was really relevant to him and this point. So I don't think there's case studies anywhere further in the thing, so I don't think Aisha will tell me off for using it. But we worked with the NHS during COVID on a vaccinations campaign across the south of England. And I apologise to the room because white other is not how I would describe the demographic, but it is for medical purposes how the NHS deem it. For the south of England, that covers predominantly Polish, Lithuanian, Bulgarian, and that's about it. Yeah, probably Polish, Lithuanian, Bulgarian as core audiences. And essentially what we did is, as well as other bits of the campaign, we shared the information and materials across these ethnic stores, as I've mentioned, and essentially what that did was moved that audience from the lowest percentage uptake of the vaccine to the second highest percentage uptake of the vaccine. So again, a really easy way to show there how we kind of use that tactic to kind of borrow the trust with something. As Tariq's mentioned, audiences will typically then believe information from home, potentially. A particular challenge that we had in this campaign as well, where a lot of minority audiences were actually consuming media from home, which had a very different view to how the UK press were kind of covering the event itself. So essentially how we kind of, so now I'm coming on to the kind of second and last part of Tariq's question around kind of addressing anecdotal information on vaccines. So what we did is we basically just listened, like I said before. So we held focus groups within our community, ambassadors, to understand why the audience weren't uptaking the vaccine, but also to understand the reasons why they might choose to understand the vaccine. And then what we did was we just addressed all those points that came out of that in any material that we produced and put that in front of them. And that's why that campaign ultimately was really effective, because we looked at the reasons why they weren't and why they would uptake the vaccine, and we addressed that. And I think just to kind of then, I guess, bring context to Tariq's question for everyone, is that campaign as a whole shows exactly what we're talking about in this conversation and exactly what we've talked about so far. So we listened to why that audience were behaving the way that they were behaving. We addressed it in the marketing material that we produced, and then we effectively reached the audience that we were trying to reach through a number of different services, one being the store merchandising that I mentioned, to essentially then really effectively impact ultimately the outcome, which was people uptaking the COVID-19 vaccine. So I think hopefully that gives Tariq a really nice answer, but also gives kind of value to everybody else listening as well. Again, if you want a lovely answer to your question like Tariq just got, then please feel free to answer. But if there's nothing else, then I think we'll dive on to the next question as well. There we go. A little kind of thumbs up to Tariq as well. Thank you. So how can we include cultural events in our strategy without seeming tokenistic? So if we go to the next slide, we will look at that. So I think the first thing to talk about on this question is to accept the piece that anything that looks out of place will feel out of place, and anything that you're being too conscious of whether you are being tokenistic is then therefore going to feel it. So the example that I always use of a quite clear way of being tokenistic is the Dove advert. You have what is essentially a kind of it's a skin tone route from lightest to darkest, and that just looks unnatural, that image, and then straight away you're drawn to the fact that that image looks and feels unnatural, and therefore it looks tokenistic, and things like that. So I think to go into the question into how you can avoid doing that is by making your brand relevant to the event that you're trying to the event and the community that you're trying to reach, and do that in a meaningful way that kind of understands the nuances of that event within that community. And I think, again, that's really important to then lean on the people that you're actually trying to reach as well. We've got a couple of pictures up here for those of you that are very eagle-eyed. You will see what is, and it's a lovely picture when in full, but I'm not sure you fully get it when it's small like that. But essentially what it is some tea lights in little boats, and this is actually at Trafalgar Square in the fountains themselves. So this was a activation that we did alongside Diwali on the square for Western Union, and this is one of the things where it kind of encapsulates what I mean. Is we wanted to give people an opportunity to engage with Western Union, with the brand, but also allow them an opportunity to express themselves culturally and religiously within the context of the festival that we were at. So people were asked to write their Diwali message on a piece of paper and put that alongside a LED light. That's just because the mayor wouldn't let us actually light candles because it was too much of a fire risk. And then float them on the fountains in Trafalgar Square. As many of you will know, Diwali is a celebration of when light kind of overcame darkness, and therefore kind of candles are very significant kind of for this event itself. So that's how we use them within this context. And I think equally, this is obviously a physical event that we went to. A lot of the questions that I get asked like this often are around kind of posting for social media. So I also want to kind of touch on that as well, because we often get the question of, oh, should I be posting for this cultural or religious event? And if I post for this one, then surely I have to post for everything. A good bit on that is, again, another link plug. There is our 2024 ethnic key dates calendar on this slide. It gives you all of the kind of key ethnic dates across the year that kind of brands can engage with in a meaningful way to reach different audiences. So to go back on the point of social media, is, again, it's making that relevant to the community that you're trying to reach and also meaningful to them. So whether that's highlighting a story from a colleague or a member of staff and getting them to explain what the event means to them, or equally engaging with that community itself in a meaningful way at a kind of grassroots level, to show that you are actually involved in kind of the event itself, in a relevant way again. I think that's the best way to avoid this kind of idea of tokenism, is ensuring that you are not doing something that feels forced. As soon as you feel like you're doing something that feels forced, then it's going to feel inauthentic to the audience and seem tokenistic, exactly like that. So you need to keep it kind of relevant and meaningful to both the celebration and to the brand itself without going miles away. Hopefully that helps on that one. Aisha seems to have just pressed on a link and taken away my slides. I'm sure they're coming back. If they're not, I've got them as well. Just whilst we take a short break whilst Aisha fixes the slides, I'll just remind everyone that you can, of course, drop a question in. I think we are a couple of questions away from the end of the preloaded questions. So if anybody wanted to bring anything up, now's a good time, because we are kind of coming towards a kind of natural end to where we've kind of preloaded questions in from people. The next one that we're going to is specific to the finance industry, which I know we've got a couple of people on this call, but the reason why I wanted to include this is because I think it's got a really relevant point to anybody within this call, and I guess equally to Tariq's point as well, that I can help highlight and showcase, why specifically to this question, but equally to any other questions that are there as well. So how can we market financial literacy programs to diverse communities? So as I mentioned, I think that really first important step that the people that have kind of highlighted this question is that they've acknowledged that there's an issue. So they've spotted a area where a diverse audience or a minoritized audience is disproportionately affected by an issue. And I've got a couple of case studies. Well, I've got one case study later as well that I can go through where this is the case as well. But as Tariq mentioned, for a lot of in his example, Eastern European audiences, they are disproportionately affected by a particular issue, whether that's based on their own behavior, or sometimes when we talk about things like certain types of medical issues, certain kind of minority audiences are disproportionately affected. So I think this point can also be true for many other people, is it's acknowledging where there's a difference and where kind of equitable comms comes in as well. So understanding that there's an issue and reaching that audience effectively. And then equally, these 4 points can also be true for everybody in this call, is and particularly those for finance and also anything health related, is it's removing any complex language or jargon, especially when English is not a first language. As I mentioned earlier, if you're targeting people that are first or second generation, generally English isn't going to be a first language, and therefore you need to think about both kind of the English language that you're using, but also potentially translation in there as well, because it needs to be easy for that person to consume. We know for all audiences that generally humans have about it's kind of disputed nowadays now that TikTok's taken over, but 5 to 7 seconds attention span. And if they don't understand what you're saying in 5 to 7 seconds, then they're going to go away. So it's removing that complex language and jargon. One of the useful kind of tips that I generally have here as well is that where possible, use imagery or illustrations to highlight a point, because then you don't have to kind of worry too much about language, more about interpretation of that imagery, which for a particular campaign that we've worked on with a sewage company is easy to highlight there as well, what not to put down the toilet, which is one of the sexiest campaigns that we've ran so to date. And then the second point here is finding opportunities to engage the audience that is memorable and different. So I mentioned the Diwali celebration earlier, and there's other opportunities like this to kind of create a space where you can engage that's valuable for the audience, but also valuable for you and helps you to stand out within that audience. They're much more likely to remember what you're saying if it's been said in a way that they've kind of never seen before. We all know about things like cutting through noise and stuff like that. So it's no different here. It's just then the essence of getting that in front of the right people as well. One of the key things that we always talk about with minoritized audiences is engaging with trusted sources, particularly kind of people or places of worship, and then community leaders equally. So at what points can we help use those trusted sources, like I mentioned with stores earlier as well, to kind of get a route in with communities, because these are either faith leaders or community leaders, influencers that have a lot of trust within a community. And therefore, your message is going to come across much better if it doesn't necessarily come from the brand. It's kind of putting your own kind of brand and ego aside slightly and trusting in the people that are there to help to deliver your message as well in this instance. And then I think one of the key things is for this point and everybody else's point is focusing on building up over a period of time. In this case, we're talking about education. And equally, if you look at Tariq's question as well, we could be talking about education around healthcare as well. I think one of the really important things to highlight here is and another resource plug for you is the resource on the page here of exploring experiences, the British Muslim Voices. So this was a report that we released with the start of Ramadan this year. So we interviewed about 500 Muslims living in the UK, and it goes into depth about their brand choice, discovery, attitudes around Ramadan, attitudes to charitable giving throughout the year, but also during Ramadan, because we know it's a massive kind of moment for Muslims in the UK for charitable giving. If you have kind of 10-15 minutes, it's a lovely read, and there's some really kind of actionable insight in there as well. So that is the plug for that one. And I will also let you all know that there should be a similar report coming out with the start of Black History Month for Black and Afro-Caribbean audiences in the UK as well. So keep your eyes peeled for that. We go on to the next question, Aisha. Lovely. So I know again that we've got quite a few people from charities in the call. Again, wanted to keep my answers quite kind of generic, so anybody can use these as insights. But hopefully this helps those in the call that are kind of looking at making steps to make their fundraising campaigns more appealing to cultural groups. We've also shared some of our kind of Aisha's in charge of our Macmillan coffee morning, so got the materials across for this the other day. So they've made their way into the slides as well. So people, and I made this point earlier, and I promised I would dive into it as well. People from a minority background are often extremely kind of community-led. If you kind of picture yourself or imagine yourself, or maybe this is you, as a person that's moved to this country from another country for whatever reason, what you will often need to find is people that are similar to you, and therefore you can help and use them for advice and how to kind of acclimatize within the UK, because often what kind of minoritized communities struggle with is a sense of kind of a sense of self almost. If you came from a completely different culture to this country, it's kind of acclimatizing to that, but equally maintaining your own kind of sense of self, understanding beliefs, and things like that. So that's where community can really help them in that. And often we see that means that they have really strong ties to the community. So that helps brands for kind of sharing information, but also helps brands kind of, and I guess this is why this is really important for the fundraising slide, also helps people kind of associate better with messaging that you put in front of them. So that's why we wanted to highlight on this. And I think one of the key things to go to this question is giving people ways to support that are relevant to them equally. And this is why Aisha put the Macmillan Coffee Morning piece in here. As many of you will know and be familiar with coffee mornings, but this year the guys at Macmillan are also encouraging people to have their coffee morning their way. And whether that's a chai afternoon, which obviously for particular audiences may be more favorable, and therefore gives them a way to support but is still relevant to them. And I think a lot of fundraising campaigns can lean into this. You see a lot of kind of fundraising walks and things like this, but are these the type of things that kind of minoritized audiences can get involved in or want to get involved in? And then what is it that they want to get involved in? And therefore, can we set up something like that? And I guess the second point is giving people a reason to support that's relevant to them. And that really goes to the point about being community-led here is people are much likely to support if they see themselves as somebody that's affected by X thing that you're fundraising for, and therefore you can help a lot there. I will go into a Tommy's case study in a second as well, which will help kind of give light to this point as well. And then finally, and I guess we touched on this a little bit with Tariq's answer, in terms of understanding fully their reason to support or their challenges to support to create inclusive comms. So what the parallel that I'm kind of trying to build here with the answer to Tariq's question is for the NHS example that I gave is we fully understood why that audience didn't want to uptake the vaccine and then gave them a reason to, or address the points of why they wouldn't. So very similar to that, it's looking at what you can understand about the audience of why they would or even wouldn't support, and then leaning into either of those things, either dispelling kind of, as Tariq said, negative associations, or leaning into reasons like a person affected in the community that you can kind of use and help to engage that audience better. If we go to the next question, I think there's a couple of case studies on there that will help make that point as well. Yeah, cool. Can you provide examples of Effective multicultural marketing campaigns for non-profits. Of course I can. So if we go to the next slide, I think that's a nice segment to the image on the right. And then I'll talk about the one on the left as well. So the one on the right, we worked with Tommy's about a year ago now. So for those that don't know, Black and Afro-Caribbean women in the UK are 30% more likely to miscarry than any other ethnicity. A tiny amount of that is genetic, but most of it is around education around miscarriage and support after miscarriage. So what we wanted to do is create a campaign that helped with that audience becoming more educated on how and where to get support and when they need support, and also help with them if they are planning pregnancy after a miscarriage as well. So what we looked at is using diverse imagery to resonate better with the audience, but also how we could then get that message and that support and information to the correct audience. One of the best examples within this campaign of how we did this goes to kind of how we think slightly differently about reaching an audience. So many people may or may not be aware, Black and Afro-Caribbean women typically have more textured hair, and therefore there are hair care products specifically produced for textured hair. What we did is we created a browsing audience for textured hair care products and set creative behind that browsing audience. And that was actually more effective of an audience than any other comms that Tommy's was running at the time. So we really effectively managed to not only reach the audience, but engage them with the content and then equally help support them off the back of that as well. I think that's a really nice way of showing how we think and how people can think slightly differently about media planning to reach a diverse audience. And then if we switch over to the National Trust piece, here we were challenged by the National Trust who, as everybody in the call will understand, the perception of the National Trust is very white, very middle-aged, very middle-class. So we were challenged to tell a story of a Black painter who had painted a single Black sitter. You might be able to see that on the screen there, which is the actual painting as well. This was a discovery that the National Trust made in their collection, and they challenged us to tell the story of the painter better than and more kind of relevant to that audience than the National Trust would normally do. The National Trust would normally just follow the painter's story and deliver that, and that would be done. What we did, and you can go and look this up on YouTube as well, the short documentary is called Inspired by Barthe. Barthe is spelled B-A-R-T-H-E. Essentially, we told the story of Barthe and then drew parallels to contemporary artists. So we told the stories of Barthe's troubles and where he kind of found challenges through his life. Sorry, feeding back. Is that all right now? Might be me feeding back to myself. Is that better? Let's take these out. What happens if I take those out? Yeah, I can't hear myself now, so I'm going to... Oh, can I not hear myself because that's muted? Yeah, I can't hear myself, so I'm going to assume that that's better now, and that people can hear me. Hopefully, Aisha can give me a thumbs up. She's not looking at the screen. She's not looking at the screen. What about now? What about? Oh, Tariq can hear me. There we go. Tariq's nice and engaged. Tariq can hear me. It's all good. Thank you. So yeah, we told the story of Richmond Barthé and some contemporary artists and drew parallels from Richmond Barthé's challenges and also those contemporary artists currently. And basically what we wanted to do is draw parallels and inspiration from those as well. And told that in a relevant way to the audience. And then equally, we worked with some diverse media to help share that story. And then finally hosted a private screening for media contributors and generally kind of, I guess, aspiring contemporary Black and Afro-Caribbean audiences as well. So a really nice piece of what we can do creatively to tell stories slightly differently to resonate with an audience. Just as my sound cuts, I think we are done with the pre-loaded pieces. If Aisha flicks over, hopefully she can still control the screen. She can't hear me. Something happened with that. That's fine. I know it's the last one. So that's all right. So there I will wrap up in that case, unless anybody has one final question, because we've got 7 minutes left. I know we're the slot just before lunchtime, so I will let everybody run off if they don't have any questions. I know Aisha will have a post survey to go around. So as you exit, there should be a survey to fill out, which also should appear on screen now. The only other thing to mention is our EDI series is coming up again in October. So we are October the 10th this year in London again. If you want any more information about that, please message me personally and we can get you signed up. We're currently taking pre-registrations at the moment. So please let me know. Obviously, an in-person event, we won't have any troubles with slides and also any sound. So that'll be good. There is a QR code here that you can use to give any feedback on today's session. All the session recordings will be available afterwards. Aisha and the team will share them. And if anybody has any questions that they want to share with the team and ask the team personally, then obviously we can pick those up after as well. But thank you for everyone for kind of looking and taking time today. And I will let you all go off and have some lunch. You can have 5 minutes back of your lunchtime, tell your boss that the session was amazing and have an extra cup of coffee on me. But yeah, once again, thank you everyone for coming, and hopefully I will get to speak to you all soon.